Bring this meeting to order at 6:02. Approval of, I guess we got elect chair and vice chair. Thank you. That's your job.
I would like to nominate David for chair.
Nomination for David Loudon as chair,
I'll second that.
and that's been seconded. Any other nominations?
I'd like to close the nominations.
It's been moved. We close the nominations. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those, never mind. Shall we vote? All those that vote for David Loudon for chair, say aye.
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 Do we need a recount?
No, I think you
Okay.
got it.
Carried unanimously, whatever. it's named.
So, Mr. Chair, congratulations once again. I'd like to nominate Jim Taylor as vice chair.
Jim Taylor's been nominated as vice chair. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And there's been a second by an outgoing member. Gonna run away?
He didn't have to put up with me.
So, any other nominations? Okay, so all those in favor of Jim Taylor being vice chair, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Not sure.
So just a matter of procedure, Mr. Chair. Do we need to vote to close the nomination like we
Okay,
did last go round?
all those in
No.
favor, no?
I'm just asking the
Just
question.
do
We
it.
did it last go round. I just want to make
I know,
sure.
but you don't even have to, I don't correct you, but you don't have to do all that stuff. You do.
Okay, great.
Okay, I got carried away. I'm sorry.
I was just curious. You
It's
did it
the
last time.
power of the gavel. I just get carried
I
away.
think he just wanted to make sure we were really, really sure he wanted to be chair.
Well, apparently we got one abstain, is Jim Taylor. The rest of the people say aye. Is that correct?
I just said
Aye.
aye. I'll say aye.
Jim Taylor's vice chair. Now, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
You didn't even let me finish.
What else are you gonna say?
I'm assuming that you've all read them. Okay, it's
Yeah.
been moved that, boy, we're going to be out of here in 10 minutes.
No.
No, no chance of that.
Shh.
Why not? Please.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. All those in, there's been a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. Although, is there a second?
I'll second.
And it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved.
Does everybody have their microphones on?
Dylan already hit me upside the head. Okay, so if you're here to talk about the stakeholder, well, yeah, that.
It's kind of the
What is it?
Parks Prioritization Group stakeholder.
That too,
community
the
stakeholder
Parks
group.
Prioritization,
Prioritization.
there you go. Group, would you just wait instead of coming up as an interested citizen until we get to that? Took me a while to get that out, didn't it? Would you say that for me?
So I'm assuming you were here to discuss the Parks Prioritization, or are you here under general interested citizen portion?
Okay.
Both are already on the agenda, though.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you'll just wait and you can join in the discussion when it's on the agenda. That help, David?
Yeah, I think I forgot to oil my lips or something today.
Oil can.
And if they were
Maybe I
here-
need more caffeine. Okay. So is there anybody who want to speak something to something that's not already on the agenda? Okay. You still need that list back? Debbie? You need, oh, it's here someplace.
Second one.
I noticed that. I saw it through the cover. Okay,
There you go.
new old business. Report of the community stakeholder group. Mr. Lawyer.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So we are coming towards the end of the parks prioritization process, and what I've handed out to you all, and actually, I apologize for not putting these out. Now you can see the comments, so I'll pull up record.
Sleep deprivation.
No, it's the same stuff.
I know what it is. No glasses.
Okay, so what you have in front of you is essentially a crop-down version of the overall list that was created towards the beginning of the prioritization process. And so what has kind of happened is we've gone through the parks prioritization process. This was this kind of sheet, the one-pager, with all the information on the back. And it listed all the parks that we had that had been identified by staff that were in need of repairs, replacement, work, generally. The initial recommendation for approval was the 2 new FTEs, which, as I understand, they're getting close to the end of that process. Replacement of vehicles, and then the system-wide general improvements over the next year. This portion that's in front of you now is really the projects that Robert and Bill are going to be working on over the next probably 2 to going into 3 years. The condition assets are listed, 5 being the worst, 1 being the best. Bob Newton right now is sort of the best of this list at a 3, so it's rapidly deteriorating. Most of these projects are under $200,000. Most of them, in fact, are under $100,000. Currently, the Meadows replacement for the playground and the path is underway. Staff has held 1 meeting so far on that, and I expect they'll probably have at least 1 more, if not more. But that's supposed to be constructed this year in the summertime. There's $550,000 total project worth on this particular list. Again, recognizing this is probably over the next 24 to 36 months. Well, actually 12 to 36 months, excuse me. And there's $150,000 in total pathway construction being looked at here. So while you might see some gaps there with Willamette and Country Glen and some of the other areas that talk about paths, the total cost for that's going to be about $150,000. So realistically speaking, this was sent out to, anyways, let me get back on my train of thought. This was sent out to the Parks Prioritization Work Group. There were only a couple comments that I got back from the group. One of them was from Barb McCullough-Jones, and she had a question with regards to the overall amount of money that's going to be available and what a total percentage of this is going to represent. I didn't have those figures at the time, and I still don't. I haven't had a chance to follow up with Robert on that. I would say that, these are just the major capital projects, not including everything else that's going to happen over the next couple of years. But I would say that, if we're looking at let's call it $600,000 over 3 years, this is roughly a third of that over a 3-year period, not being prorated, because the first year was prorated, I think, at like $470-something thousand or something like that. Good chunk of change out of that. Now, that's not recognizing the fact that there's going to be other projects that are going to happen. This is going to be kind of a living work plan in terms of staff is going to need to be able to have the flexibility to address major safety concerns or other projects as they become available. And this actually has no capital projects indicated on this, and those are things that could potentially happen if they come to surface. The major comments I received, you can see there's a whole list of these Facebook comments that I took down off of the 2 Keizer pages. One of them was asking when bark dust is going to be done this year. There was some discussion about lighting at Claggett Creek. I engaged in a conversation with one of our neighbors about that, and basically just said that right now the park rules say that the park closes at sunset. Adding lighting could encourage behaviors after hours. and a possibility of increased homeless population. There was some discussion about playground equipment being replaced at Claggett. A woman said that her son had been injured on one of the playground equipment. I immediately directed her to go talk to staff about this, and if she could take photos and identify the specific areas, we could get on that immediately from the staff perspective. Did not get any feedback on that. Some of the, one of the comments came from Shauna Fennison, who is the mother of PFC Ryan Hill. So PFC Ryan Hill Park over at Keizer Station was done. She had asked about possibly putting in a play set for kids over there. I don't think right now that's anticipated in the master plan, but that could be something discussed. I guess PFC Hill really like kids a whole bunch, and she said it'd be great for people to be able to dump their kids off when they go shopping. And I thought, well, okay, but you know,
Well, if I may, when the hotel opens up, that would probably get used. And it is a nice little, it wouldn't have to be anything extravagant, just
Right.
something simple.
and in the summertime, there's a lot of people that walk through that area, so
Yeah.
there's a possibility. I don't think it's anticipated in the master plan right now, but and then let's see. I think we had a couple other ones. Oh, one of them. This was one that was already brought up during the conversation, is related to the Meadows Park. Somebody had talked about putting in an actual gate there that closes versus sort of the I don't know, what do you call that gate? It's got like an entry and then a path and then like another gate piece, but it's not very secure in terms of kids being able to sort of run out. River Road's pretty busy right there. So I know that was brought up, and so other than that, you know, a gal lives over Country Glen, wanted some swings, a splash pad, and a bunch of benches over at Country Glen. You know, a lot of really good idea for capital projects, but not many in terms of the actual prioritization topics here. But again, I think it's very important to, you know, have the discussion from the people that we live around and, you know, bring it up to the group here. What's that?
Oh,
Sorry. So sort of the next steps here, Mr. Chair, if you'd allow, I'd like to hear from some of the folks that have come to talk about this this evening. I'd like to basically affirm this recommendation as a recommendation of the projects over the next 12 to 36 months and be able to take this to council under the council update on the 20th, I think it is. That's right. It's either the 20th or, yeah, I think it's the 20th of January. Is that?
No, the next meeting, council meeting is on the 16th.
No, this says Tuesday, January 20th, so
Yeah. Oh, what does?
the agenda says,
Oh, it does.
yeah, so it's the 16th? Okay. So we could take it to them, and so this is kind of the idea. This is just sort of the wrap-up of the deliverables and the reporting expectations that we can have for the council. The idea is that by budget time, staff will be able to come back and say, yeah, you know, we've got bids on all these, you know, various projects for this year, and then looking into next year, we can really start to kind of create a very predictable and comprehensive list of deliverables, so that, you know, we all know where our money's going. So that's kind of where I'm at. So again, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow, I'd like to hear from the folks that came to talk about this, and then we'll wrap it up and have a conversation about forwarding this to council.
Yeah,
Staff have any comments? All right, anybody wants to talk about the parks prioritization? Do you want to come forward, one at a time, or two, or whatever? Make sure your mic's on. There's a button right there, red button, I think. It's red.
It's on. Hi, my name is Carol Dorfler, and I live in Keizer. This is sort of about the parks prioritization. That's very hard to say, and excuse me, but I've had a terrible cold. I just want, I'm very delighted you all are going to have money to do things in every neighborhood park. I live in West Keizer. We've been really fortunate to have a lot of things happen in our parks. But there are some projects that I think are still out there waiting to be done, and Robert knows about the one that I'm going to speak about, and it's the tennis courts or the sports court at Willamette Manor Park. And that was repaired, tell me if I'm wrong, 2 years ago?
Yes.
And then last year, there was a terrible ice thing that happened, and it destroyed what had been repaired. And now is it on the schedule now to be done this spring?
So, yes, it didn't, I would like to correct part of what you just said. It did not completely destroy what was done. Some cracks are reappearing.
Okay.
There was approximately 200 feet of cracks that were repaired at that time, and I was down there last week, and there's approximately 20 feet of cracks that have come back. So about 10% have come back. And yes, we have that on the agenda to get resolved this spring when the weather starts to allow. It's a certain, we can't do it in the rain.
Okay.
And it's a continuing process of maintenance that's going to take place on that court until we decide to completely rebuild it.
And at what point would that happen? I mean, how many times can you repair?
Well, to rebuild a sports court, it would cost approximately $60,000 to upwards of $100,000. And to make repairs, your minor repairs, such as we're talking, when you're repairing 20 feet of crack, would be about $2,000. So it's kind of a balance of, do you spend $2,000 a year in repairs? At what point would you shell out a big number? And
Exactly.
I think it will happen, but this list is higher up on the priority at this time, just over the next couple years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't like it, but I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
I don't like it either,
I
but
mean, I don't understand, but because this project has been ongoing now. I mean, the courts were unusable for at least 3 or 4 years, at least that long, until Robert did get them resurfaced. And so now I'm thinking, so the original park budget, is that dumped into what's going to be collected through these fees, through the new parks fees?
Yes.
Or did,
yes.
is that a correct understanding?
Yes, we get to keep our original budget, and then the fee is on top of what we were working with prior.
Okay, so it's not possible to use any of those new fees that are coming in to not resurface, but, not repair, but redo,
Rebuild.
rebuild, thank you, that particular sports court.
It is a possibility. It is absolutely a possibility. We just have, this list currently has items that are in complete disrepair, as Willamette Manor was previous to some repairs being made. You know, when we've got, I'm just going to throw something out there, a gazebo that has roof shingles falling off, and we're at the point now, if we don't put a new roof on that this year, we're going to be stripping all the wood off because it's rotting and starting over. And now a $10,000 project's going to be a significant amount more. So it's just kind of, where does each item fit in as a priority to this list?
And that's not the only one that I'm concerned about. I'm sure there's other parks out there that had things that they wanted to get done, and now we're going to wait, and they're going to wait for these other projects. So, and I understand that they're probably in worse shape, but
So, Robert, I have a question of that 200 feet. How much of this 20 feet is part of that 200 feet?
I think he's asking if there is like places where there weren't cracks before that are now, in addition to stuff.
So is this 20 feet? So
They're
you did-
small
you did-
rips,
you did
Matt.
So it's not 20 feet cumulative.
Okay, let me explain this just to get everybody on the same page. So this was a court, probably one of the oldest courts in Keizer, other than probably Northview, for instance, which, if you want to even consider that a court, it's a small asphalted half court that's very lumpy bumpy. This court had about 200 feet of significant cracks. By significant cracks, I'm going to say something you could probably fit your pinky and or thumb into, okay? So the only way you can repair a crack that large is to fill the crack and then overlay the void with a material similar to something that you would maybe fiberglass, where you lay an actual mesh over it and then you seal over the top of that. And so this mesh is laid over the top of these what were cracks that are now filled to help flatten and fill that void to a playable surface that you need in tennis. So as that court continues to expand and contract with weather, heat, and ice, everybody knows what last winter brought us, right? About 11 significant snow and ice events. Those cracks expanded and retracted a lot, okay? And then you go into the summer where you have heat. So about 10% of the cracks that we had repaired are now showing where the mesh is lifting up about 20 feet of it, of 200 feet. So about 10%. These are the cracks that she's referring to that have reappeared. I did reach out to the contractor that we used prior on this job due to various incidences that have happened to this particular person and company. He was unable to come back and make some repairs for us. So this spring, we will be reaching out to other vendors and making sure that these cracks get repaired. And it's not a big dollar amount that we're talking to repair what is taking place. Ultimately, the best thing to do here long term would be to rebuild the entire sports court.
Because you have a core failure.
Yes.
out there, yeah.
Yeah, you're continuing to use an old court that's going to continue to give you maintenance issues.
So
Now, prior to the fee, we had no choice but to try to get this court back up to somewhat of a usable court based on the amount of money we had available to us. Now that we have the fee, we can go into a whole different conversation down there. However, it still is not as high of a priority as some of these other items that we are talking about on this list that need to take place in the next 2 years.
well, where I was going with that was whether or not, because of the failure of the repair, the company would be liable for warranty. Because typically a crack seal and a slurry seal like that are generally supposed to be about a 5-year repair, depending obviously on how
Yes
deep
and no.
whatever else.
Because of the severe condition this court was in, the warranty that was given to the city was very minimal, if you will. Basically, it was not recommended that we take this road of doing so many significant crack repairs. It was really recommended we rebuild it. We couldn't afford to rebuild it, so we did what we could, which was still a good option for the amount of money we put into it.
Sure.
But as far as getting a good 5-year warranty with it, it didn't come with that because it wasn't a recommended repair.
And it was used after
Oh, yeah.
it was repaired. And
Yeah.
I went down, I rode my bike down there quite a few times, and there were people down there.
Oh, yeah.
And they were playing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but once those rips,
Yeah, you can call it a rip.
rips.
Sure. Ripping the material.
It's very unsafe to do that because you're running across the court and the next thing, you know, you could get yourself tripped up on that thing and down you would go. But that's what I have to say about the Willamette Manor Sports Court. It would be nice if some of these other things that have been hanging out there for a while could also be taken care of with the new funds. And I understand what you're saying about these things. I understand that at all. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thanks for the discussion. And good luck with your projects. I have one question. What is considered a capital project, Matt?
Is that basically anything new?
The dollar amount?
No, it's basically anything new.
Pardon?
Anything new.
Oh, anything new. Okay,
So
All right.
it'd be a capital improvement type project.
okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Would
I'm correct on that, right, Rob?
would replacing the court we're discussing count as a capital improvement? 'Cause
If
it's a
you
whole-
if you're replacing something and increasing the size of it significantly, that could
Right.
count.
Right.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then it could become maybe eligible for citizen development funds.
SDCs, yeah.
Well, but then also, the reason it's a concern is that we promised not to use the fees for capital improvements, didn't we?
No, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, when we went through the prioritization process, there were other projects that were discussed. Specifically, there was some discussions about walking paths at Bear, Palmacy, and other parks, or benches, possibly looking at completing the lawn at KRP if that same group came out last year and said, hey, we'll do it for the cost of the environmental, the $1,800 DEQ thing. So there are a few that have been discussed, but nothing in the immediate 12 to 36 month range.
I think our priority is to repair existing things
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
then move on later.
Well, and
to-
that's
okay.
what the city told us.
Yeah.
They said, fix what we got.
Yeah. Great.
And by the city, I mean our neighbors.
Mr. Taylor?
Well, just to add on to that, I mean, we looked at, Robert, I think that what we were looking at is deferred maintenance that had gone on and on and on, and the longer it goes, the more expensive it is to fix. And just economically, it's best to do those things first, and then throw the safety part in, that if you have something that you can improve the safety of, to put some of that money in there. But I mean, I think, I don't want people to think that all of a sudden we're getting an extra $600,000 a year, all of a sudden we have $600,000. We don't. We're getting it month by month by month, and it's gonna take, you know, a year or two before that builds up into where we can really look at doing anything. So, to start with, there's not a lot of money, and, but there is more than we had before, but so that was one of the reasons we had the prioritization was we knew we weren't gonna have that money in one lump sum, so let's prioritize what we wanna do first and second as that money comes in.
Next public speaker? No, we're doing the prioritization right now. Anybody want to speak on the prioritization? Well done.
So I think, you know, I do really want to thank the people that participated in this discussion. We've had a lot of meetings. It's been really great to sort of see people's perspective on this whole conversation kind of come full circle from maybe not supporting it to supporting a little bit to being all about it, and then being able to have this discussion about how we're going to look at the future of our parks. You know, to be able to be in the room with Robert and with Bill and to watch the folks talk about, you know, the Meadows Park and the reconstruction there, it was just huge. Like the kids were excited, the adults were excited for the most part. It's a really good. This is a good thing, I think, and you know, Carol, I'll take down the note on the Willamette sports court piece, and I'll keep that. I've got, you know, these are all my notes through this whole process, and I've got them in a file, and they sit at home. And I promise you that, you know, if when it comes, if they don't kick me off the Parks Board by the time this comes full circle, I'll make sure it's right up in front of everybody, because I think it's important. But I guess with that, Mr. Chair, I would ask for consensus, I suppose, to, well, no, I think we probably need to make a motion to send this to City Council as the final working document for the first 12 to 36 months parks prioritization projects.
So that's your motion, that we give this to the, present this plan as is to the city council for approval?
Yeah,
Or
I think so.
adoption?
I think so.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, any discussion?
Yeah, are we sending this exact packet, or is it the other one that's,
It'll probably be, good question, Dylan, it'll probably be both. It's gonna largely be this table with the figures. and then the 550 total with the walking pass of the 150,000.
Are the Facebook comments going to be included?
We can.
I would.
Yeah.
I think.
They'd like to see those.
Yeah, I think it would be valuable, but you might want to maybe
Hey,
cut it
Roland?
down to like an edited list of the concerns brought up in the Facebook comments. I don't know.
I'm
yeah.
probably not going to get in the business of editing people's comments. I just think
Well,
that's
no,
dangerous.
I don't. I guess I don't mean to cut the quotes them, but I'm saying like remove some of them that
fluff.
aren't. Well, yeah, exactly. There's some stuff that definitely maybe shouldn't make it to city council on there, and then I don't know, just the like.
So just the actual recommended projects is sort of what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, I've got a list. Actually, I've got a really good set of notes that Wayne did back when he was just a regular old private Joe like the rest of us, and that was awesome. I was actually reading those today, and Wayne did a great job on those. So, yeah, I mean, I'll have that all consolidated and ready to go, and
Okay, great.
we'll be ready to rock and roll.
I had a question on the estimated cost.
It's a different thing.
We haven't bid any of these projects yet, so how do we know what they're going to cost? Or I know they're just estimates, but do we, I know playground equipment is expensive, but
Yeah. So for playground equipment, we have reached out to various playground equipment providers and installers to get estimated costs for a project of this size. So we do have multiple sets of numbers already prior to actually going out for a formal bid. So they're pretty solid numbers, give or take. And as far as like pathway, like asphalt repair, there's mathematics you can do based on the size and length for doing that. So that's how you can come up with those numbers. And I've also received bids for things like the roof at the gazebo. I've actually met with contractors and gotten pricing on those too. So there's actually a lot of pricing that has taken place behind the scenes. It's not just numbers being thrown out for general conversation. It's actually pretty good numbers.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other? Okay. We have a motion on the floor to present the packet to city council for their adoption. The form isn't going to be set by us right now. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Now, Mr. Taylor, you're on the agenda next with your research on smoking bans in parks.
Okay, I contacted Brad Hayes from Salem Parks Department. Do you know Brad?
I do.
And I told him what was going on and what we wanted to do, and I had some specific questions for him. One thing about, trying to think of the word, what do you do if you find somebody smoking? You know, do you arrest them? Do you do whatever? What's the word I'm looking for? Enforcement. Geez, that's a tough word. Yeah, anyway, what they do is they don't enforce it. If one of their parks people's out and see somebody smoking, they'll just remind them there's no smoking in the park, but they don't put handcuffs on them. They don't do anything. They don't kick them out of the park. He said that generally the park users have enforced it. You know, they'll tell people. And he said that smoking has gone down considerably in the parks. Of course, one of the parks that they were really concerned about was Riverfront Park because there's so many kids there and it's used so much. And they do tend to be a little bit more aggressive there, telling people not to smoke. But in the other parks, they just have signs up and people pretty much obeyed them. There's people that don't, and that's the way it is, but they're not really concerned about that. They've had a lot less garbage as far as cigarette butts. There's a lot less of that. But he said, you know, the thing, because I told him one of the things that this group was concerned about was enforcement. And he goes, it's just one of those things you're just not going to enforce. But the fact that you're not supposed to smoke kind of enforces itself. And that the people that are going to smoke anyway, they're going to smoke anyway. And then if somebody finds that offensive, then they will tell them. And if they want to get in a fight, that's not their problem. But he says they really haven't had any problems with that. So he kind of put me at ease about the enforcement. And, because I don't think that anybody on this committee wanted the police going down there being cigarette cops, or Robert and his crew being cigarette cops. And I don't think that's necessary. I didn't contact Marion County after thinking it over a little bit. Their issues are really different. Their issues are more in forested areas where they don't want people smoking simply because it starts forest fires. I mean, you go up to Little North Fork and a lot of these parks, they're pretty much forested areas. So I don't think it's really, other than looking at Keizer Rapids, which we deal with differently, it really would have been comparable. So Salem's, I felt, I wanted their attitude, and that I got. So, and then they have another policy, and it's written into the policy, that if they have neighbors next to a park that complain about the smoke, and maybe somebody coming out smoking on the sidewalk, because that is public right-of-way, they will put a sign up, no smoking. So if we were talking about, let's say, Darrell Richardson's property, and while people can just go out on the, right there at the edge and smoke, and he'll get the smoke anyway. If he came to city council and said, we're still having problems with people doing this, and the city council felt that that was a problem, they could put into an ordinance that in places on public right-of-way where it was stated you could not smoke, you can't smoke. And that's what Salem does. Now, I don't know if they've ever enacted that, but it is in the ordinance. So that would be beyond our rank. So that would be a city council deal. Anyway, that's the information I got.
Marion County has also banned smoking on all their properties.
Right, and Salem has most of theirs too, I think.
Yes, but I work out of Public Works, and I still find cigarette butts in the parking lot.
And
only
it's
ones
against a lot of drink and drive, and people still do it.
The only ones I see that go off campus to smoke are the employees. So, any other questions for Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I have some questions. So I'm really interested in Salem saying that they saw a considerable decrease in both litter and just general smoking. Do you have any, what does that mean exactly? How much less are they seeing it?
He didn't really have a number. I asked him the same thing. I mean, what kind of percentage? And he says, well, he didn't really know because they hadn't really counted before. Mm-hmm. He says it's less noticeable. And they've had fewer complaints from people that don't like the smoking. And he says, it's not too often you go into a park that you see somebody smoking. So I think some of the bigger parks, maybe like Bush Park, you might see it. But I know that he says it's really cut back at Riverfront. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't really give me a percentage. He just says it's noticeable. It would have been hard to do a percentage unless you would have said how many people are smoking before.
Right.
And now what do you count? So it was pretty much off the cuff of what he had observed.
I'm a little bit disappointed in that. I wish there was a little bit more solid. I know.
I don't know how they would have done
I
it.
wish there was.
Yeah.
more information on that, because, I mean, there's many different factors. Did banning the smoking do it, or is it just smoking is becoming less of a
Well,
thing? Like,
this
there's
is,
a lot
this is
of-
since they put the ban in.
Yeah, when was that?
I think it's been, Robert, do you know, it's 3 years?
I don't know.
2 or 3 years. It hasn't been a long time.
Not that long, yeah.
No, and they pretty much had the same concerns. People came and didn't want smoking in the park. It was basically the same, you know, it was citizen-driven. And I don't know if they ran it through their Parks Board or if it went directly to their city council. I'm not sure. 20, okay, so 2.5 years. And I don't, I think I asked him if there was any objection on council. And he wasn't at the council meeting, but he didn't hear a whole lot of backlash, so I'm not really sure how the city council dealt with it. But again, that's above our pay grade. So I know they did it, and they feel it's been successful, but they realize you're never going to stop everybody from doing it. And they're not going to go out and bust people. I mean, they politely tell them and let them continue to be jerks, I guess. So if you want to smoke and bother somebody, what are you going to do? So,
Yeah.
Rhonda?
Good evening, I'm Rhonda Rich, and I'm going to wear 2 hats here, and I'll tell you when I switch. But I'm on the board. I'm on the board of the West Keizer Neighborhood Association, and we're glad that you're bringing this forward and discussing it. And so this is the time for us to kind of jump in and give a few comments. We had a board meeting last Thursday, and our concern, being next to Keizer Rapids Park, is the main concern that we have. Mostly, basically for fire hazard. So there was a motion made at the board meeting to ban smoking at Keizer Rapids Park except in the parking lots, and that motion carried. And kind of a background on that, the West Keizer Neighborhood Association has always been concerned about fire safety over at Keizer Rapids Park because we've got homes right next to the park. We're adjacent to grassy areas, abutting pathways now. We've got a pathway comes straight down, and a lot of park, that park is growing in use. And it doesn't take much to flick a cigarette butt out over in the grassy area and affect the homes there. So this concern has been huge during the summer months when the grass is dry, and we're concerned about cigarettes being tossed and starting a fire. We testified in 2015 and 2017, I think came at the Parks Board meeting and City Council to ask for a ban on smoking. And at that time, too, Keizer Fire District, I think along with Marion County, asking for a ban on recreational fires. And kind of it was like, okay, this is a big drought and we're concerned that this is, seeing fires all around the state and other states that we asked if they could post signs, and we felt it was kind of a self, that we had to do it, and we don't want to have to do that, to come forward and say, well, we're concerned next door, that we would like to see a ban. So probably the best and safest way to avoid any tragedy is to control the use of cigarettes and all smoking instruments at Keizer Rapids Park. So we just hope that you would give this some serious consideration. So I'm putting on my other hat, my personal hat. I'm a non-smoker, ex-smoker for 30 plus years. And so I understand some of the concerns that you have for smokers' rights, but I'm also a health-conscious citizen, and I'd like to personally support all parks in Keizer to prohibit smoking. And I'd like to read some information from Eugene's smoke-free parks policy, because I know Jim brought you some information from Salem. I did a little research, and Eugene just 2 years ago also became smoke-free. Their slogan is play hard, breathe easy, which I thought was a pretty cool thing to say, because that's why we go to parks. We go to play, the kids go to play. They have, if you go to their website, www.eugene/.or.gov, you could read all this, because I'm not going to go through all of this. But it says, what are the benefits of a smoke-free parks policy? Creating a healthy and welcoming space for Eugene residents and visitors, reducing exposure of children and youth to smoking and tobacco use, protecting their health and discouraging them from starting a potential lifelong addiction that's harder to quit the earlier it is started. Supporting individuals who are trying to quit smoking or tobacco use or who have already quit. Protecting parks and natural areas from environmental degradation caused by littering of cigarette butts, which are the biggest form of litter worldwide. Release toxicants into the environment and take approximately 10 years to decompose. Protecting parks and natural areas from fire risks. So right now there are 64 cities and counties and park districts in Oregon that are smoke-free. They made the comment, there's kind of a question and answer, did the community have a chance to comment? They said during the public comment period, there was overwhelmingly in favor of creating smoke-free parks, with approximately 99% of respondents in support. So community members also expressed a strong desire to see the downtown park blocks included in the new rule. And their enforcement, because I know that's been discussed here, primary method of enforcement will be education and asking for voluntary compliance. Community members are one of the best enforcement tools for a smoke-free policy. Most people do not want to be exposed to secondhand smoke and are willing to speak up if they are being exposed and know a rule is in place that is being violated. It's expected that community members will help ask people to follow the rule and stop smoking. So that's pretty much how they deal with it. Bellingham, it's not reinventing the wheel to do this, and I know there's hesitancy because there's a concern, I think, of lashback, this people who smoke, well, you're affecting my rights, but I think as stewards of a park where open air people expect to go out there and not be impacted by smoke, I think is a valid concern. And also in Salem, they also had a kind of Salem Parks Go Smoke-Free. They also go on the self-enforcing policy, like Jim said. And also they say enforcing these violations will be primarily complaint-based and can involve a police officer issuing a warning or citation. Police response to complaints will be based on the priority of other calls for service. So if some police are driving through the park and somebody calls them, I would assume they would probably go over and if there was an issue, take care of it. But if they have a burglary or something else, because I think there was concern to taking the police from more important things.
He did tell me he didn't know of any cases where anybody got a ticket or anything by the police for doing it, to his knowledge.
Rhonda? So that was a nice policy statement they have in their ordinance, but how effective is it?
Well, we don't know, but it's there.
See, that's what we've been debating. How effective would it be?
Well, I think if you have nothing, then there's nothing to be,
Well, I understand that.
And I know like the off-leash dog law or rule over at the park is, I've had dogs run. I don't really care for dogs running up to me and say to the owner, well, this is not an off-leash dog area. You should go over to the dog park. And I've had some good response and some not. And so, but at least I have something to come forward and say, this is a rule, just to let you know. And if you don't have a rule, then I can't say anything. I can't say, oh, well, I just don't like dogs, and you know what people are going to tell you. So, but you ask about cigarette butts, and I had a friend down from Bellingham over the weekend, and we talked about this. Bellingham just adopted a couple of years ago, too, the no smoking. They say cigarette butts are a major and persistent source of litter, as evidenced by the following. 2007 is estimated that Americans consume 360 billion cigarettes each year. 55.7% of smokers admit to littering cigarettes in the last month. And so, you know, litter is also a problem. If you designate smoking areas, then who's going to clean up the cigarette butts? And we know they don't decompose. So I would hope that you would come forward with some kind of proposal to the city council that they can discuss, and they can have public hearing and get public input on it.
We have presented this once to the city council, and they threw it back at us.
Right, they asked you to get more information on,
Oh, they
on what
wanted-
Salem does. And
Well, they asked us more specific, we said in designated areas. So they wanted more definitions on that. So it's not like we haven't been doing something.
right, I know you've been working on it. And like anything new, I think Salem, we all know now that Salem is smoke-free on their parks. I think, you know, the first year, it was also mentioned that they gave a 3-month period where there was education out there, some people out there, you know, notifying people, even information out there to help people if they wanted to quit smoking, to, you know, places you could go to get support. So it was a 3-month period of education, and it will be probably a year or so before, if you did ban it, that people do realize that Keizer is smoke-free, the parks are smoke-free. Also, at Keizer Rapids Park, I see that as growing, and once you get those sports fields in and more people coming from the area and out of town, I would think it'd be easier to get something in place now than wait down the road till you have a heavily used area, and then you start saying, okay, well, you can't smoke, and people in the bleachers, and somebody's sitting right next to you and wants to smoke, and you know, they smoke because they can. I think, I'm not saying smokers are inconsiderate, but I know that, you know, the addiction is kind of overwhelming sometimes, that it's, you gotta have a cigarette, you know, I'll have one. So anyway, I just thought it was timely to jump in on this because you're discussing it, and I do hope that we do move forward on this, because I do think there's a lot of hesitation on, you know, people coming and say, well, I should be able to smoke wherever I want, and where does this stop? Is it going to stop at, you know, tell me I can't smoke in my home? You know, it's a right issue, but I have a right to fresh air too. So, and there's no secondhand smoke, you know, level that's safe. So that's all I
Okay,
have.
thank you, Rhonda. Anyone else want to speak?
I-
You already speak.
Well, I have a question for Rhonda.
Okay.
At your meeting, was there anybody that objected to a ban on smoking, or was everybody?
Well, I think they felt that, I told them what you have been discussing, and we felt that maybe we should start at Keizer Rapids Park, because that's right in our neighborhood, and it's a huge regional park, highly used. That, you know, there's still some discussion as to, you know, where, like we said, you know, smoking in the parking lots maybe would be something you would consider, and I think that's what you took to the city council. So that's where we didn't have a huge discussion about it. We just, you know, mostly for the fire danger, the health issues were not really discussed, and I didn't have some research that I have
Well,
now.
one of the arguments, and I don't want to take words out of your mouth, Dylan, but one of the arguments was, well, you have a right to smoke if you want to, but I look at it the other way. You also have a right not to have to put up with that. And you're in a public place in a park, well, why should your right to clean air be taken away by somebody who wants to exercise their right? So it goes both ways.
Right, well, I've been over at the amphitheater,
libertarian.
and there's been cigarette smoking over there. And I thought, the last time we went, I'm not going because it drifts. I mean, it's like, you can't contain it. If it was just like in your personal space, then, you know, probably people would not be against it. And I was told that they don't allow smoking at the amphitheater, but I know there was smoking over there, because I talked to Daryl about it, and he said, well, you should tell somebody, but, you know, who's working there, and they would, stop the smoking, or say something to them, because,
They
So
let
I
them
don't
go
know.
outside
They're
the
right
roped
outside
off
the gate,
area.
the roped off area. That's where they're
Uh-huh.
allowed to smoke right
and
now.
it drifts right in. So,
Correct.
yeah. So, yeah.
But they didn't have the authority.
Right.
Because we don't have a no smoking policy to tell people they couldn't smoke at all, because if they were outside the amphitheater area, they had a right to smoke. So, you know, it helped a little. I think if you were down in the amphitheater, it wasn't bad, but if you were up above, you still got that secondhand smoke.
It's not going to take care of 100% of it. And like you said, but there will be something in place.
Roland?
Thank you, Chair. In regards to your concerns, let me turn this on. You know, Portland, I don't know if you know this, about 3 years ago, they passed a smoking ban in parks, made it a misdemeanor, and they did e-cigarettes, the whole bit. And I want to follow up on this, because if the community feels strongly about it, there's a process to do that, and we're hoping we could get some kind of information. Myself, the reasoning they put it through and pushed it hard, and this is what they used as reasoning, because I kind of kept up on it, was the educational part, and the part you said about having something solid to say. They weren't after anybody's rights. They were after like more of a educational statement. This is not good for us. You know, smoking's not good for you. Litter's not good for you. So that's how their approach was, more public education and keeping our parks clean, respect for other people, you know. Because in Keizer community, where we all grew up in the parks, for example, Little League, you always knew who the smokers were, and they kind of had their own culture. They walk over to the corners. Remember that?
Oh,
Jim?
parking
They walk away from everybody, a little respect for the other people. And then later, as years went by, people didn't do that as much, and that's where I came. First time it ever popped in my head that might be an option, you know. Not that I'm against it, or I'm not against it, by the way, but I'm just saying that if we have the right approach, public education, like they did, and did a strong argument, and people that are reasonable will listen to the right arguments. And I really believe that just hearing you right there, I mean, you have a passion for it, and you guys bring a good, you know, nobody's going to get in a big fight or get in big trouble or get arrested or something like that. But just telling your kids that, hey, you know what, you're not allowed to smoke here. That's good enough for me. I mean, that's how I look at it. So keep your fight. Keep going. But that was just my 2 cents. And I know that it's not going to be effective as far as enforcing. But, you know, just having it out there for somebody thinking the right thing to do, to tell people, making a message that parks are for everybody and kids included, and, you know, that type of thing. It's not a bad thing at all, if done correctly. That's what I would look at it. So that's my 2 cents, sir. Sorry, I'm late, Mr. Chairman.
Did you bring donuts? Bring donuts next time. Thank you, Rhonda.
I don't think that's enforceable.
Okay, thank you.
We'll pass an ordinance. You late? Bring donuts. Dylan?
Yeah. So, like, I want to follow up on kind of what Roland was saying. Is that's probably the most interesting thing that Rhonda said, was that the community was what made this and like was responsible for the enforcement in Salem, and it sounds like in Portland too. I don't know where I stand yet, but I do think that it's more important. I do think it's more important and significantly more effective to get the community to stick up for it. Like, it's our responsibility as a citizen, if we're being bothered, to go over and say something to somebody who's bothering us and say, hey, could you not smoke here? And if, you know, some sort of public education is going to be the way we go about that, that would be, I think, both the right thing to do and significantly more effective. So I don't know how we deal with that exactly, but some sort of community education situation is what I would be in favor of.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Mr. Taylor was first.
Roland, yeah, you mentioned that in Portland, I believe it was a misdemeanor. I would think, and if you could, can you ask Shannon, or if you did pass this ordinance, I would think there would have to be, as a criminal, would have to be some sort of criminal
I don't know.
part of it where it was a misdemeanor. And it's, like I say, I'm sure the police force is not going to go out and arrest people for doing this. But at the same time, there's got to be something there. It can't just be, oh, we have a rule. And Salem has that, and I'm assuming Portland, you said that they do have it as a misdemeanor?
Yeah, it's a misdemeanor, yeah.
Yeah, and so
But
we would
here's-
probably have to do the same thing.
Here's how they do, I mean, like, I could go up to somebody and say, excuse me, did you know that there's no smoking in our parks? You know, how you approach it, and they say, whoa, I didn't know that, or something, or
Yeah.
they'll say, I can't. You know, it depends on how you approach it, and I think that's
Yeah,
how
if
I
you
do
go
it.
up and
I
say,
pick up
hey,
cigarettes
you-
every day, by the way, so.
You
I'm
go up and
kinda-
say, hey, you jerk, you're smoking on our,
See,
well,
there
now
you
you
go.
started off right. Now, that's not gonna work. So, you know, I think what Dylan was talking about, that if we, I'm sure we could get some good advertisement in the Keizer Times and on Facebook and everything else, and then figure out ways to educate the general public. But anyway, I think it's a good idea for educational.
Joe?
I know that going towards a rule is eventually what this really seems to be leading to, but I don't see where there's anything saying we can't put signs out just saying, Keizer Parks appreciates your not smoking here, and starting the education without having to have rules saying don't smoke or you'll have, be in violation of whatever. And it can be an educational process long before we outlaw it.
That's actually an interesting thought. But we do
I like
have
that
no
idea.
smoking signs up at the big toy, and when we had the engineered wood fiber in it, there was still cigarette butts in there, so that tells you where that goes. Any other discussion? Staff want to weigh in on this?
I
Coward.
have one comment.
Yes.
I would like there to be some type of a sign, like something Joe just mentioned, we appreciate you not smoking, So if we see, if we're walking through the trails at Keizer Rapids and someone's lighting up, we can refer them to that sign. Hey, did you see the sign? We appreciate you not smoking. We can't really say don't smoke, but, something to refer to. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable confronting someone that's smoking unless they have some background or something to enforce or encourage that person to not smoke in a public area. Keizer appreciates you not smoking.
I know some members of the city council, I believe Mayor Clark said she wasn't interested in ordinance that are unenforceable, so then we get back to that all over again.
If,
You have a comment?
if I may,
Oh, I
Matt
thought,
and I had a conversation, and he had an idea. Do you want to enlighten us on that?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
absolutely.
So, again, we're talking about a very, very small percentage of the population that we're spending an awful lot of time on trying to help change behaviors and do those kinds of things. For the most part, anybody that you go up to and say, my kids are 10 feet away, would you mind not smoking? They're going to be responsible and go, oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Okay. The very, very small percentage of these morons that are going to choose to give you the finger and ignore you generally ought to lose some teeth, in my opinion, because they just don't have any respect for other people. They don't have respect for their neighbors. They don't have respect for community folks, and they're just not going to care. So we talk about education. We talk about maybe modifying behaviors. The reality is, even if we do recommend as a board to please don't smoke or ban smoking or whatever, it's still going to happen. Regardless, will it give people the opportunity to say, hey, there's a sign here that says you can't smoke? Well, yeah, but that's confrontational. It's way more confrontational than going in and saying, hey, would you really mind not smoking? I got asthma issues or things like that. So doing some research, and I for the life of me, I can't remember what the city was, and I apologize for not having the exact city, but there's a city in Colorado that chose to, they went through this whole process, and rather than saying you cannot smoke, they said, here's where you can. And they provided a mechanism for that in terms of basically a pole where they could extinguish their cigarette. It had gravel and stuff underneath of it, so it didn't have to worry about fires. And basically said, this is the designated smoking area. And they had 1 or 2 signs around the area that said, please smoke only in designated areas. And that's kind of where we kind of got to the original motion, and never really came up with a plan on that. You know, the wooded areas such as Palmacia, Sunset, Bear Park, pretty much anywhere along the river at Keizer Rapids, for safety reasons, you know, the public works directors had to go through the process of going to council saying, hey, we want to ban this because of X, Y, and Z. I think that's just a reasonable person expectation. Anywhere in wooded areas, no, period. I just think that's a major safety concern, especially during the peak time of the year for usage. But the idea is to take potentially these poles and put them in areas that are as minimally or completely unintrusive as possible. So, for example, if you were going to do something, let's say at the Big Toy, it would potentially be like something right at the entrance of the Big Toy at Walsh Way. If it was Claggett, you would put it at the Dearborn and Claggett Creek, or excuse me, Shamawa sides, and then have signs, you know, designated smoking areas, please only smoke in designated areas. Something to those effects. What that does is it says, you know, we don't want you smoking in the general areas, right? Which I think most people, including smokers, and I'm going to go on a side tangent here for just a second. I went on my own Facebook page and I opened Pandora's box. I said, tell me what you guys think about this. I had over 90 replies, most of which were pretty objective, both from smokers and non-smokers alike. I had many smokers tell me, well, to heck with my habit, ban it. I had many non-smokers say, why does it bother me? I had my parents both tell me that they would actually be in support of a ban, and they're both smokers, even though my stepdad's a knucklehead and would, you know, he was like, yeah, I mean, if you ban it, I would pay attention to it. He goes, but I'd rather, you know, not have to deal with that and just, you know, if somebody come up and said, hey, please move. And I said, well, I'll remember that next time I come to my house, but it is what it is. So, but the overwhelming thing was, in responses that I've talked to folks is, you know, take care of the rubbish, because it's really unfortunate when we do cleanups at the parks and all we see is a bunch of cigarette butts and stuff. It's not good for the environment. I agree with, you know, Rhonda 100% on that. As the chair of the Watershed Council, when we're doing cleanups down around the creeks, we come across a lot of cigarette butts. Coffee cans full of cigarette butts. You get the urban nomads hanging out under the bridge. It's almost all cigarette butts and Mountain Dew. I guess that's the thing to do. You know, to try to first encourage folks, hey, you know, this is a park. Let's talk to our neighbors, be willing to have that conversation. But if you so choose to have to engage in your habit, this is a place where the city has said, keep our city clean. And so that's an idea. I did some research. It's about, if we did one for all of the parks, which includes the natural parks, I think it was about $2,200 is what I came up with. Again, I'm a little more reluctant to want to do something like that for the wooded parks, just because I think it is such a significant issue of fire hazard. You know, we had a ban in Keizer Rapids last year when a fire was started at the park because of a smoker. Just saying, a couple days before the Eclipse event. So that's an opportunity. If we wanted to continue having the conversation about the designated smoking areas, you know, that would be one route to go, would be to designate it, again, I really like Wayne and Joe's idea of saying, please don't smoke in our parks, but, we have designated an area for you that's right near the right of way. Again, as minimally intrusive or non-intrusive as possible, and go that route. But that was just one of the conversations I've had with a lot of different folks. So.
Any other comments?
Non-smoker, by the way.
Oh, okay, are we ready for a motion?
Well, if there's no other comments, I guess so.
Well, kind of going on what Matt said. I'd like to make a motion that there is no smoking at all at Keizer Rapids, Bear Park, or Sunset Park, and Keizer Little League. That's all, I'll include that even though that's already no smoking. That all other parks, there will be designated smoking areas, and that staff would decide where those are appropriate, and that we put signs up thanking people not to smoke and only smoke in designated areas, except for the 4 parks that I mentioned. And I think, and one of the reasons that at Keizer Rapids, about the only place that you could have a designated area would be really around the parking area, but then you've got smoke drifting into all the areas that people use. So I think it would be simpler just to have no smoking down there 12 months a year rather than just the 4. And then the other community parks, Robert, is that doable for staff to find places for designated smoking in the other parks?
I suppose we haven't taken a really close look at it
Yeah,
because we're
but-
not there yet, but might be doable.
Yeah, and then the appropriate signing. But again, I think council asked us about the designated smoking, and so I guess my motion would be the designated spots be where staff feels it's appropriate, and then the no smoking ban in the 4 parks named.
Before we get a motion, it would be, a second, it would be nice if we were consistent with the same rules in all the parks. So there's lots of space outside the wooded area in Keizer
Right.
Rapids.
Boat ramp, all that.
Yes, so
Well, I'm fine,
instead of the entire park.
So,
You could ban it in the wooded area, I can see that, but
Or the
smoke in
field.
designated areas,
the field or whatever.
well, there's
why-
grass in all our fields.
Why don't, okay.
Let's go on. Let's go for a second, if there is one. Is there a second for the motion?
as is, no, not me.
Not as is?
Okay,
Do you want to rephrase that?
all right.
So, Mr. Chair, before,
You want to discuss this
no,
before we
I
go?
have a
Or do you want to
question I
discuss
want to
it
ask.
after the motion?
I want to ask a question before we entertain any additional motions. Taking into consideration something that Rhonda brought up, I would be really interested to see if we could do, I don't know, can we do a public meeting on this as a Parks Board? I mean, can we bring it in and open it up and just say, hey,
Yep, I do
Well,
believe
that's
we
what we're
can.
doing tonight.
well,
But this is not a
no,
public
but
hearing.
notice it
Well,
and,
it's a public- it's
and actually
been
really,
noticed.
and really actually get the feel from it. I mean, I tell you, if we get 500 people in there to come and punch us all in the eye and say, no smoking, then, well, obviously, we need to be a little bit more,
I would be more inclined to let council do that.
they're gonna punt it back to us. If we don't
No,
have, if we don't have,
they punched back wanting to know where we were gonna have the designated areas.
and we said we'd ask staff, and they said, nope, that's not good enough.
So we're doing the same thing now.
Because that was how we presented it last time, was basically staff would figure it out, and they punted back and said, no.
Well,
I don't think we're asking answering their question.
my motion that I made last time that I couldn't even get a second on was to designated areas being in the parking where you park. And then to put one of these things, like you said, the receptacles,
You talking about the
There.
last meeting?
yes.
Well, you made so many last time.
Well, I made 3 and I got a second on 1.
But that's not the one, but that's not the same as having a designated area. Because if you just say, oh, you can do it anywhere that we're parking, during the amphitheater time, you're
Right.
parking through that whole entire field.
Well-
We don't want them smoking there either.
No,
I mean-
on a designated area in a paved parking area.
But the
And
motion
it would
before
be-
was
yeah,
just parking.
Right, but this would be signed so that this is the area for smoking in the parking area. And that would hold true for all the parks. And actually, that holds true for Little League Park, because you can smoke in the parking lot to Little League Park, which is actually still part of the park, but you can smoke in where they park cars. So I guess my motion would be that there be a place in the parking areas that is designated for smoking, and that all other areas are smoke-free.
So you're saying that for all the parks, including the wooded ones? You want a designated smoking area?
Well, the wooded ones, I do believe that Public Works has a right to close those to not smoking when it's appropriate for fire danger. Is that right, Robert?
Correct.
So we would be just being redundant if we put that in, because they already have the ability to do that.
I believe her question was that you originally were going to eliminate those. Now you're going to say in the parking lot in those areas too, correct?
In the parking lot where a designated spot in the parking lot with a receptacle for cigarette butts.
Point of question, is there paid parking lots in all the parks?
No.
Is there
As a ma-
gravel parking lots or some non-flammable parking lot in all the parks?
So Bear Park does not have a parking lot, and Sunset Park does not have a parking lot.
Other than the right-of-way?
Correct.
Do we want to address that separately?
Is there a motion on the table?
No, we're still discussing this before. Well, there's sort of a motion, but it's in
Kinda.
flux.
Can I bring up one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. You refer to wooded areas. Do you want to refer to all riverfront parks? Because most riverfront parks have wooded areas.
Right.
Just a thought. If you're talking about that.
I want to make I want to make a motion. Can I? Do I get to do that? Or do we have to? It's entirely different, so I don't want to derail it, but I kind of do.
I want to hear his motion.
Is that okay with you, Jim? Since you kind of have one out there, but it's not clear, do you want to let him
I don't
make
wanna-
a separate motion?
Let's see where mine goes, and if it goes down in
I don't even know
flames,
what your
then,
motion
is that all right, Dylan?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
yeah,
we're-
yeah.
we're
I
kinda
think I'm going to make
confused
mine
which-
either way, so let's go for it.
Do you want to just think about it while Dylan says something?
No, because his might pass.
Jim, I have your motion. You move to recommend allowing smoking in a place in parking areas designated for smoking and all the other areas are smoke-free.
Yeah,
All right, there you go. Is there a second?
there's an opening on the board, Rhonda.
I would love to have Rhonda. Rhonda, can we talk afterwards? I'd
Motion
love for you to
fails for
come
lack
sit
of
up here with us.
second. Dylan, it's your turn.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we suggest to the council that there are signs placed at every park along where all the other signs are for every park that just says, "Thank you for not smoking." I think it's a more positive way to empower people to point at something and say, "Hey, would you not smoke here? The city doesn't want you to," without actually making any sort of law that isn't enforceable.
I'll second that one.
Moved in second, we put up, please do not smoke.
No, no.
Oh.
Thank you for not smoking.
I'm sorry. Thank you for not smoking in our park. Is that close? Or whatever you said.
It's, yeah.
No, okay, you got it down what he said, not what I said?
Move to suggest that, to council, that signs be placed in every park that say, thank you for not smoking.
Thank you, Debbie.
Discussion?
It's been seconded. Discussion?
Doesn't, I just
Joe, I think
would
was
like,
first.
oh, I just would like maybe to adjust that to say, your Keizer neighbors, thank you for not smoking. Make it a little more personal. Let's just add some words.
But then you have to have a motion to
People
amend
from
the motion
Jersey
on the
don't
floor.
I'm fine with that if, I don't know.
I know some people, anyway.
Are you okay with that, Dylan? That amendment?
I don't know. I'd like some discussion on what people think about it. I don't know where it,
We're discussing, we'll find out.
That might be a little too wordy. That's my concern on that
yeah.
one.
Okay, any other comments on Dylan's motion as it was stated?
I like it, but I would rather just have a ban, so I'm going to vote no. But I do like the motion. It's, you know, it's better than what we have.
Any further discussion?
I would be curious to see what the possible legal implications are. I think by the city doing signage, I don't know. I would just be really interested to see, I mean, because that's, if it was a citizen group that did it and they said, hey, we want to come in and build all these signs and put them up at the parks and we're going to sponsor these, I think that's one thing. But public dollars going to pay for that, I don't know how that would play out, and I don't know if that creates a de facto rule or not. So I'm just a little bit leery on that one.
Well, you can think of it as simply a recommendation to the city council, and
We're not-
their
we're not
attorney
saying that's
can,
what we have to do.
their attorney can figure that one out, unless you're just dead set against it.
No, I'm not dead set again. I just,
Well, I understand your concern, but we don't have attorney on staff. Yes, Mr. Johnson,
Can I give my 2 cents?
you can put in $1 if you want.
All right. I like where you're going with this. However, from the person who ultimately is responsible for all signs in all parks, it is a pain in the butt as it is to keep all signs up from being vandalized and or stolen. And how does that look for staff in the near future? And how many signs would we be responsible for maintaining? Signs that are not required to be up, I suppose you could say, and are not regarding something that's being enforced. In other words, I think every 13-year-old would love to have a sign in his bedroom that says, please don't smoke. So my fear is, as hard as it is for me to keep the park rule signs up from being vandalized and or stolen, I'm not so sure how well those signs are going to last. And I might be buying lots of them and putting lots of staff hours in replacement.
So that would basically be true for a no smoking sign as well.
Yes, it would, unless you banned smoking entirely. Then you wouldn't need to post signs necessarily. It might just be known.
Just one at the entrance?
I mean, at Keizer Rapids
Lots and
alone,
just
we
replace
might
them
be
every-
posting 12 signs because it's so big. You have to cover the whole park. You have to cover every trailhead, every entry, every parking lot, every kiosk. That's a lot. That's just one park.
Are there rules signs at all of those places?
There are park rule signs at most significant places. Most trailheads have a park rule sign. Most parking lots have a park rule sign.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting.
So you're saying if we did smoke-free, then we could say, we could just have it at the front of the park, and that would be enough? But if we did this, please don't smoke, it would be, we would have to put several? We wouldn't be able to just put it at the front? Or thank you for not smoking, sorry. Thank you for not smoking.
It's already in the amendment, the way it was supposed to be.
I mean, ultimately, it's your call, but I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd probably be about the same amount of signs if it was no smoking. I'm assuming that you would put them in the same places. Right?
Possibly.
I can see them going away real quick on the disc golf course. That's a weird place at night. Well, I was down there at Eclipse, and there was all kinds of weird things going on down there.
My ideal scenario, of course, would be that that it would be included with any signs that were replaced in the future, so that a Parks Rule sign would then at the bottom have a separate thing that just says, thank you for not smoking. But, yeah, I can see how a completely separate sign would be easier to steal than a whole big thing, but, yeah, I don't know.
Electrify it.
You could
Have
put
security
video
cameras
cameras
on
on them.
Yeah.
I mean, you got them down there at the golf course. Has that helped you any?
Yes.
Well, maybe if you had video cameras on all yours.
I don't know, stealing's already illegal. We can't enforce that. This is a whole can of worms here.
So I'm gonna go back to, I think, my original question that I think kind of got ignored. Depending on the outcome of this motion, I would be really interested to see about having a conversation with our neighbors, inviting people in here with a specific time to have this conversation with our neighbors and, you know, bring Rhonda back. I think she had some very good points. I'd like to hear from other people personally. And, you know, I've done my homework on it. Again, I engage people I know, but then again, most of the people I know are generally pretty responsible people. I just really like to see what this looks like, and then if there is an opportunity to designate, not go at this half-cocked, actually come up with a plan, whether it's putting pen to paper and saying, here's the areas on the map, or whether it's the ban, whatever it ends up being. But, you know, we've heard from Daryl, and I respect Daryl a lot. He's been a community volunteer for decades. Rhonda's always great to have around and offer up opinions, but those are really, and other than actually sitting in the West Keizer Neighborhood Association back in, I think it was October, November, where they did discuss this a little bit, you know, that's all personally I've heard from it, other than my friends, my personal friends. And so I'd really interested to see, you know, number one, if we held a work session or a public meeting, if people showed up. If nobody showed up, then is it really that big of an issue?
You
I
know,
don't know.
you know what might work? You get a bigger response. If we could ask Lyndon if he would do, you know, he does a poll in the paper,
I think they did.
They got like 30 people.
and what was the response? Do
No,
you
I mean,
know?
they get 30 people on average on those polls. So it's, I mean, but again, let's hear, I mean, let's get from behind the freaking keyboard and have conversation with our neighbors. I mean, these are the people we get to see every day and talk to every day. I mean, look, again, I'm not a smoker, all right? You guys have heard me. I don't let my parents in the house within 15, 20 minutes after they've smoked. I don't particularly care for it, all right?
Well, the people that I've talked to, a lot of my customers, not one thinks it's a bad idea to ban smoking in the parks. What does that mean? I don't know.
That's
but
because you're
I
giving them
probably-
10% off on their lawns. But
Well, I've probably talked to 30 people, and every one of them thinks it's a good idea to ban smoking.
well, tell them to come here and talk to us then.
So I don't know.
That's my 2 bits. I mean,
What's the likelihood of this ever going up to just a vote, like whenever our next election season is for the city of
No,
Keizer?
it's too
Is that,
expensive.
be really expensive.
Way too costly.
yeah. That's,
Well,
I don't know. I don't think that it can ever be truly put to rest until the citizens actually get to.
Well, that would be
officially
the
saying-
advantage of a public meeting, is that we could get, we appreciate your input, but if we had more people, then we could
Well-
quit doing all this same thing over and over and over again. Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Any other new discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, thank you for not smoking. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I got that. Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Any hands? Who's opposed? Who's opposed?
Those are opposed.
How many?
David, Jim and I, so it's 4-3.
Okay, that
Well,
being
we
done.
did something.
Well, I'm going to see if we can do something
Well,
else.
We'll see what happens to.
So,
Well,
Council,
we haven't
so-
put a ban. We could still do a public meeting on that. So,
yes. Okay. Matt, would you like to put out a motion for a public meeting on this subject?
Before y'all leave, I would like to make a motion that prior to presenting this to the city council, we offer an opportunity for a public meeting on this issue to allow folks to come in and provide testimony on it before we send it to city council as a final recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second that we have,
I'm sorry, who?
Joe. Is that your last act?
I'm going to be very active this meeting.
All right, any discussion on that? Other than tapping our phone? I know.
We've had
All
good
those in favor
conversation.
say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Could you take care of the required postings?
Yes, I am not sure. I think we can do it for next meeting. I think
Yeah.
there's enough time, so we can have one at the next meeting.
Rally your troops, Rhonda.
Thank you for coming, Rhonda, and say that to all your cohorts that already escaped.
Yes.
I
Thank you.
appreciate your support.
I do as well.
And I appreciate your input. It's good.
We do
It's your
have,
turn, Mr.
we do have 2 positions open, Rhonda.
Actually, Donna, I got a text from her. She's going to come back,
Nice, good,
Good.
One.
or she's going to apply. Yeah, there's another person that's good.
Uh-huh. You can say that again. Mr. Johnson, you have 20 seconds.
20 seconds. I'm going to make this really quick. Because we're talking about this, I want to talk about Phase 2 of the skate park and just make sure it's on our radar, if you will. Phase
So
1
it's not on
was,
this list, though, right?
no, it's not.
But this is a continuing project.
Yes, just to keep this, to keep the skate park in our eyes, if you will. Phase 1, we were able to get in there with minimal funds and keep the skate park open and somewhat safe. Phase 2 looks a little, quite a bit larger than what we did on Phase 1. We would like to rebuild a portion of the park that is no longer used because of the design that was originally built and lack of maintenance. What that looks like is basically do kind of a pour over of the 2 bowls and connect the 2 together to make them more flowing, if you will. You can kind of enter one bowl and make your way over to the other one without exiting the entire piece. And also to rebuild what we consider kind of the half pipe area. Right now, if you look down from standing on top of the half pipe and you look down the half pipe walls, there's a lot of waviness in the concrete, just kind of a bad pour originally. We would like to rebuild that and then continue doing what we started this summer, and that is grinding the surface down, making it smooth again. It's becoming a kind of a exposed aggregate just as time's gone on, and a lot of skateboard tires and wheels have gone over it. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from the kids using the park after what we've done. They love what we've done. They'd like to see more of it done. We did the really important spots. We'd like to continue to do the rest of the park. And also finish doing a coping coating. Coping is the metal that they like to slide on. We had a lot of key areas refinished, and so we'd like to do that throughout the rest of the park. So that project, I don't want to throw specific dollar amounts at it, but it's in the $200,000 range, give or take. It could go either direction from there, depending on what we land on and when it happens, all of that. But just to kind of give a rough estimated idea of cost, it is a larger project. And I know it was important to council, a lot of the councilors, when we originally were talking about the fee, that was one of the larger ticket items. And we were able to kind of squash the discussion for now, but we need to keep talking about it and keep that project in mind as we continue to move forward in this prioritization list.
Is that something you could do later this summer?
No, uh, yes and no.
Well,
Later this summer is in after July 1.
Well, I was thinking probably after school started. Is it about a month-long project?
No, it would probably be more than a month-long project, and it really depends on prioritizing it
Well,
up against all these.
I want to get back to my original idea. If we want to get this done, is to borrow that money from the SDCs and then pay it back, get it done. And then you can pay it back over a couple of years. That way you don't have to save money and not do things that, well, gosh, we'd like to do this, do that. You can borrow from the Parks SDC fund and then pay that back with a minimal interest. And that way you can get it done. That would obviously be a council decision,
I don't,
whether to use those monies. But, the sooner the better, I would think. Don't,
so,
Yes and no. Go
Robert,
ahead.
correct me if I'm wrong, though, you're not budgeted this year to do it, so we'd
No.
have to be after July 1st, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you can't even really move on bidding and contracting or anything like that really until the new budget, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if we put that project into the priority list of the 2019 budget
Right.
year,
Right.
then I could move forward on getting hard costs, knowing that I got to build that budget here in the near future. But
well, I
If you-
think, my thinking is, and I've had a couple counselors say to me, well, what's with the, I supported this because of the skate park. And so I think it would behoove everyone if we got that done as fast as possible. And because it's a money issue that you don't want to take away from the other monies, is to use the SDCs and pay it back. Now, for anybody that doesn't understand, you can't use SDCs specifically for a
maintenance.
project like this. I won't get into the whole thing, but you can't. But you can borrow from them and pay it back with interest. So you're borrowing from yourself and paying it back. And that's been done in the past quite a bit. In fact, the water department, or the public works used to borrow from Parks SDCs and pay it back. But I think, and that's another real visible thing that the community could see. And I just don't want it to be held back because we want to save the money until we do it. That's kind of silly. Just do it. We have the money. It's in the SDCs. It'd be very, very few dollars spent to pay that back with interest, yet it builds up the SDCs that we can use for something else. So I think it's a win-win. So just food for thought, if you think it's doable. I mean, that, you're the one that does the budget and knows the timeline on this, but.
So, Robert, I'm glad you brought this up. I think one of the first updates after we got the fee approved, and Councilor Herr, I think you'd probably recall just as well as anybody, but I know one of the things that we brought up was the success of Phase 1 was so good that in fact it bought us a window of up to a couple years before we really had to move forward with Phase 2. Is that right?
That's somewhat accurate, yes.
So, do you remember that conversation when I brought that up to council?
I know where you're going with this. Are you talking about repeat what you just said right now?
So when I present, so right after the problem, the challenge is, so the decision on the fee was on July 17th, right? The park wasn't complete until after August 21st, right? Or it was first part of September, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so September, I think 10th is when it opened back up because it was right before we did the park store. So we were a couple months removed from the fee being approved and the project being complete. So at the time, we didn't know just how good Phase 1 actually ended up being because we were kind of expecting it to be worst case scenario. But the experts came in and said, no, in fact, it's not in as bad a repair. And so the conversation initially, when we first brought this up, was a $750,000 project to completely or almost entirely remove the majority of the skate park and completely replace that. Because I think phase one was so successful, and they identified specific areas, specifically the grinding of the entire facility, as well as the bowls repairs and the coping that Robert just brought up. I don't think it's as immediate of a concern, which is why it didn't get put into that immediate grouping.
Well, it's also a money,
Well, hold on, let me finish.
it was also a money thing that if you'd have put that in the original grouping, something else would have had to go because we wouldn't have the money. Correct?
Not necessarily, because I think had phase two been of such an immediate concern, that would have been the priority likely, and we would have had that SEC conversation right out the gate. I think where Robert's going with this, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, is I think you're just trying to get this back on our radar so that we can start looking at this potentially within the next maybe 2019 spring, summertime, rather than as immediate, like right now, it got to happen thing, right?
That is where I was going with it, yeah, is just to make sure we have it on our radar. Let's talk about it. Maybe let's have some public outreach and get that prepared for 2019.
So
It'd be a little bit of a rush to fit it into
Yeah.
20.
Well, yeah, what I don't want to do is do a whole bunch of bandages now and spend another $20,000.
No, and that's not
So if we're
at
not
all
doing that,
being discussed.
then wait till 2019.
But I think the bigger piece of this is really is taking the time to I think be good stewards of this fee and make sure that we're doing the outreach and we're talking to the users of this facility, just as we've done with the Meadows and all these other things. This is going to be kind of a one-off process, I believe, on its own, because it is so unique, and I think there is an opportunity to really engage the users well. There are other sources of funding that have been looked at. There's other grants and things that are available where we may not necessarily have to do the SEC conversation, and those are things that I think we should be able to talk about hopefully pretty soon. I was going to bring up another business, so I'll wait till then. But Robert, thanks for bringing that back up, because honestly, with all this other prioritization thing and it not being on the list, we don't want to lose that, because I know it was a significant enough issue that on July 17th, it was sort of a determining factor for the fee, but then we found out a couple months later we weren't necessarily.
We didn't know what we didn't know.
We didn't, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Well, what I would like to see is maybe a meeting here with a lot of the kids. Do you think they would do that?
They'll show up.
And if you did that, you get them involved, they have ownership.
I think we do
They
it out
take-
there on their turf.
No, I think if they came in here, they'd feel like they were really in the process. And,
But one of the things that I've learned in any land use stuff, you get a hell of a lot more education out on the ground than you do sitting from behind a desk. And so I'd be more inclined to maybe start it here, have the conversation, then go out with the kids and say,
that's fine, but I think you invite the kids into a special meeting, hear it, and then go out there and let them show us. And, but 2019, that gives us time to do those things.
we need to start now, but yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Director, wasn't there also discussion about somebody writing a grant that was going to be doing part of something for that?
I actually have that on other business, Councilor Herrera, so if you'd like me to address that now and the chair is willing, I can bring that up, but I do have that on other businesses, part of my
Well,
notes.
let's do that in the proper order.
Okay.
Okay? It's your turn, Roland.
Okay, well,
Robert's not done.
I'm sorry. It's late.
I was trying to
I'm
keep it
old.
under 20 seconds, but then you guys take the conversation from me, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just make them shut up and
All
we'll all.
right. I'm excited to announce we are doing interviews tomorrow for 2 municipal utility worker parks positions. So, sorry, Jim.
You're too old.
And also, we are going to start removing the orchard at Keizer Rapids Park starting this weekend because the trees are in such poor condition they can no longer be farmed.
Wow.
So, you will see some heavy equipment down there ran by volunteers, great volunteers of this city. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They will be placed in piles. They will be eventually burnt via agriculture because we are going to be hopefully planting that orchard area with some type of a wheat or grass that can be harvested, and we can continue to lease that property out and see a little bit of revenue come in from that until it's ready to be developed. And it also eliminates us having to maintain and mow that. So it will be a win-win situation once it's all complete. But I just want to let everybody know, in case you see trees being removed, that's what's going on.
They are just terrible.
They're terrible. Yep.
So I have one other question for
Yes.
you. You think we could get them, when they have to plow that to get it more flat, you think they could swing around the fence and get that big open area for us?
That's a conversation that will be had at that time. Yes.
And we'll have a permit in place for them to do that, right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Here,
Outstanding.
here's the problem with that is we can do all the agriculture practices we want in the orchard area because we're going to be continuing to farm it. The second we start doing those type of activities in other locations, now it requires a different permit because it's not
Realize that
agriculture.
since
So
I already talked
hence-
to Bill
hence
about that,
the-
because that's not ag, that's
hence
been
the
removed.
Permit being in place is what you're talking about, yes. But I
And
just
the
want to make
permit
sure
for them to
everybody's
go out and start
aware
that
of that.
flattening process.
Yep.
How long?
We have that permit, right?
No, we have to get
Don't
it.
have that permit.
Oh, I thought they applied for it. last
No,
summer.
no, that's one of the things that stopped us from doing it before, is we didn't have the money for the permit.
$1,800.
All right, Robert, I stomped
That's
on
it.
your toes once, are we done?
That's it, sorry, over 20 seconds.
28.
God, well, you look like, never mind.
Are you done?
Now it's Roland's turn. And
first of
remember,
all, I
Roland, you're late
apologize.
next week, next month, you have to bring donuts.
I will bring cookies next time, how's that?
Okay, cookies will
Usually I
work.
leave 10 minutes early from this public safety.
Swing in and Safeway through their drive-through bakery and get some. No.
I will bring your cookies. But, and as I told Debbie that I would be 10 minutes late, I couldn't leave early. The presentation they made, Jason Myers and the group on the epidemic of the opioids, it was amazing. And so and hopefully I'll bring it over here so we can share that. Anyway, as far as the council goes, just some upcoming events. I wanted to give kudos, first of all, to the police department that solved our little graffiti problem that happened back in November, or was it November or December?
No.
November. Made a big all the news, and also the way they handled that episode over on River Road, which we all are aware of, where the gentleman ended up taking his own life. But kudos to the fire department, Keizer Police Department for that great job. Some upcoming events that I want people to know about. Upcoming is the First Citizen Banquet, which is Keizer's biggest party, and that's on the 20th, right here at Civic Center. Get your tickets if you haven't yet. It's a great event. We have the Winter Sports Banquet that I wanted to announce for our volcanoes, and that's on the 27th, of January, and that'll be in Mission Mill. That's a really fun event too, by the way. And this is something that's a free event this weekend that I wanted to pass along from our chamber lunch today. If you've never heard of Dr. Chan Hellman, his name, he was here, I think, last year, and he was incredible. It's free. It's called the Psychology of Hope, and we could use a lot of that these days. There's a breakfast, and all this is free. That's February 13th at 7:30 to 8:30, and then there's also some networking after that. But Dr. Hellman is really incredible to listen to. He's also entertaining, by the way. So, also, I wanted to, pardon?
Is that here?
It's gonna be right here at Civic Center. That's February 13th. If you want any more information, by the way, they feed you, and it's just a great, listening to this guy is really great, and talks about hope and working together in communities. I think it's sponsored by, it was Salem Health last year. I don't know the county's doing it this year, but it's very entertaining and very hopeful message. Last but not least, a plug for CTEC, which is, we had a presentation today, Chamber, from part of the bond and whether it's gonna happen or not, but McNary's gonna have, expansion in their C-Tech program. And that's, the auto mechanics are gonna have a diesel mechanic place, and they're gonna have a shop. And if you want some information on that, look on the website for McNary High School, because that's a fascinating thing Keizer citizens should know about. And, that's pretty much it. We had kind of a low key, but we did have a lot of announcements and some activities going on, so, thank you for that. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Roland. We're up for other business, so that would be you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just two quick items. One was a follow-up from last meeting, is related to the two grants that was presented or discussed by email from Richard Walsh. I sent a follow-up email to Mr. Walsh, you, Chair Loudon, and Debbie on December 13th. Basically asking for some additional information, and I have gotten to this date no response. Did follow up with a text message and haven't gotten anything back on that, so I'm not really sure where that is as of now. As it relates to other business, Clyde Creek Watershed Council is meeting tomorrow night, first session of the year Thursday night. We're looking for a couple people to be on the general council board, so if people are interested in that, that'd be great. And so Councilor Herrera brought up other grants. I sent an email to Bill and Robert and CC'd Chair Loudon on it. And so the state of Oregon has, through their Oregon Park and Recreation Department, they have repair and restoration grants with specific criteria in terms of population size and economic impact and all this other stuff. And Keizer actually is really right in the wheelhouse of being a pretty good candidate for that, in my humble opinion about our fantastic city. And so one of the things that I asked was, when would it be appropriate to start having the conversation about when and if we can apply for one of these grants? It's a 50% match. So if we went for $100,000, we'd have to put $100,000 in. If we went for $750,000, we'd have to put $750,000. But essentially, you'd get a lot of bang for your buck for these types of projects. And the types of projects specifically are repairs, restoration, and replacement of assets throughout the park system. And considering that the majority of our parks are 35 plus years old. Most of the assets, such as Willamette Manor, such as Claggett, the whole list of the deferred maintenance items, and not to mention the ADA accessibility portion of that conversation, we as a city could potentially have a very good shot of qualifying for a repair and restoration grant. These take a long time to put together. There is a significant amount of work that has to be done. You have to have a general idea on some of the bidding. There's a lot of work that has to go into it. The public works director expressed his interest probably for a 2019 grant, meaning we would basically spend this year prepping to apply for 2019, which would be for probably late 2019 or early 2020 projects. So we're still within that 24 to 36 month window. And again, trying to determine what projects those might be, how much we'd be looking at applying for. And so the conversation is sort of beginning to happen. It is going to take, like I said, a lot of work. I'm kind of waiting to hear more from staff on sort of when they really want us to kind of start pulling the trigger on that and doing the workup for that. But it's a really good opportunity. If we were able to secure it, you imagine $750,000 grant, we could do $1.5 million worth of projects. That would really, really, really put a significant dent in the long-term deferred maintenance items that we've had for so many years. So, Oregon Parks and Recreation.
Oh, okay.
So they've got a few different ones, but I think this is consistent with what the city, our neighbors have asked us, is to maintain what we have and fix what we have first before we really look at any other grants and opportunities. Now, with that being said, if somebody came in and said, hey, I've secured a $500,000 grant and I want to build, I don't know, swimming pool, thank you. We would, yeah, I mean, but again, we'd have to look at that. I mean, if somebody like Hans or somebody else is gonna come in with, we have to be respectful of that as well. So, hopefully I answered your question, Councilor Herrera, in terms of that grant and sort of where that's being looked at.
Somebody was, I thought you had somebody in mind that was doing the grant for parks. Is that the one?
So I think the one specifically as it related to the skate park, they have the Tony Hawk grant and a few other grants specifically for the skate park. Is that what you're talking about?
The young man seemed to be aware of one. The young man made
Yeah, so that was Dean and Dean Leto, who was the young man that came to us, and he had talked with some folks. Gosh, this is a little over a year ago, and he would be somebody I think that would be good in an advisory sort of position to have that conversation, specifically as it relates to the skate park, as part of that repair and restoration grant, or as part of one of the Tony Hawk or otherwise grants. The problem that I'm coming across with any of the skate park grants is it has to be a complete brand new build, complete redesign or rebuild, and I don't think that we're there. I mean, that's a multi-million-dollar project, and there's the match that has to go into that is just, it's a ton of work for $50,000. Not saying that it's not worth it, and if we get to that point, obviously we need to look at it. But it's just our population actually is really right on the edge where it doesn't support it because they want a higher population density in some of those projects and some of those grants. So. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of just a quick brief snapshot of some of that discussion. Again, like I said, I'm hoping to talk to staff and really kind of figure out when we want to actually broach that conversation and start doing the planning on that. I mean, I deal with grants every day, so it's nothing new to me, but we'd really want to make sure we did our diligence and make sure that we can get there if we can. So. I think. That's all I had for notes. I am done. Yep, thank you.
Okay, before we adjourn, I'd like to welcome Wayne to the board. He's our new volunteer. And we'll get it all out of you. And then we've already drained Joe of all his energy, and he'll be leaving us. And we will be sorry to see you go.
Well, and for those that don't know, Wayne's kind of a silent partner in the city. Built some awesome soccer courts out there at Country Glen, and has been playing behind the scenes now for a couple years. Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, I got involved in parks because I built a soccer field,
Right.
created a soccer field. I've been on traffic, bikeways, pedestrian safety for about a year and a half. I see you have a grant here possible for safe routes to school. That might be more of a traffic issue committee. But I am on that committee, and we are working on safe routes to school, or walking routes to school. They're currently on Keizer website. Debbie posted them. And currently they're as safe as I think they can be. I use Google Maps to create those, and Google Maps would create maybe 3 options, and I would select the one that I thought was the safest one for a starting street and how do you get to that school. So I've been doing volunteer work. I do a lot with the Salem Kiwanis Club.
And you started out with a big toy.
I've worked on the big toy. So ever since I've been here, I've been doing volunteer work. When you're retired, you need a hobby. Doing things for the city is a good thing.
Do you have any parting thought for us, Joe? All right,
No parting wisdom from Joe.
no parting wisdom for us.
I just thank Joe for spending that really, really cold day last year in February, standing out in front of Weimar with me, handing out all the flyers for the park survey. 2.5 hours, you froze.
All right, we stand adjourned at 8:02.